and that is, of course, Kemba Walker and the Knicks have mutually agreed that he will miss the rest of the season and work on a trade in the offseason. So we know that Kemba Walker, since he joined the Celtics, then joined the Knicks, he hasn't been himself, right? We all know that he has struggled these last couple of years, and it has been really it's really been some sad times. Whoops, did not mean to start that up. It's been some sad times, I would say, for Kemba Walker's career. Just seeing that, he was once, one of those guys that was looked to as like one of the leaders and scorers in the league in terms of being a point guard. He was leading those I would say those Charlotte teams to some decent runs at times. And now we find out that he's going to miss the rest of the season. Pete, he didn't exactly have the right stuff going into the season. We know that he dropped him from the rotation. He only was averaging 11.7 points in his first 18 games and then returned in December following injuries and COVID-19 absences. And, hasn't been in the lineup since January. So, Pete, what do you think, man?
It's a tough look, that's for sure. I mean, honestly, I hate to say it. I really hate to say it, but this is like the current guy that I would say. Sorry for my headphone movement. This is the guy I feel like in the league that's just gotten completely washed from injuries. Like I feel like he's right now is Blake Griffin, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It had to happen for the Knicks. Like as a Knicks fan, thank God he's not playing. Like he's terrible. Like defensively, he's negative 50. Like he's so bad. And then even offensively, he just can't get anything to go in. Like he had that one game, I think he had a 40 night after coming up. The first night he came back from being benched, I think he had a 40 piece that night. He was good. Like he looked like Kemba from Charlotte. He was solid, but I just physically, he just does not have that on a night in, night out basis. So it's a tough look. And from the Knicks side of things, like what's the purpose of even having that guy as your backup, right? Like you have a backup technically you have a bunch of backups in weird positions, right? But you have Derrick Rose coming back eventually, right? And we know how Tibbs feels about Derrick Rose. So Kemba is not taking the backup 6-man spot over D Rose, right? And I mean, honestly, the way that Tibbs likes to run this team with Alec Burks running the point guard so often, which is astounding to me still, right? But that's the way he likes to run it. Kemba, there's no spot for him. And there's also no good in just cutting him either, right? The financial implications of cutting him is not good for anybody because really he's not going to get a better contract this season. So he might as well get paid. And when it comes down to it, we're going to be able to move that expiring next season pretty easily. Right? It's like, I think what is it, $4 million? Something like that.
Let me double check.
I think it's $4 million. I mean, you could get probably, like, I think I read in the report, they hope they can get a second round pick. Maybe for the contract when it comes time to move it. But, who knows? Whatever it is, it's not a hit. If anything, it might even help us get some.
So the contract is, sorry to cut you off, Pete, but the contract is a 2-year, $17.8 million contract. So about 8.9, 8.7 the next year. So, I mean, it's still like a good amount where you can trade it and maybe get a good asset for him. If that's what the Knicks, that's what they're choosing, it looks like. So, it's not the end of the world. It's not like game breaking money like the Celtics paid him a couple years ago. But it's definitely, it's still a good chunk, I would say, for like making a move.
Most definitely, because like honestly, if let's say he was on that expiring contract right now, 8.7 mil, like I think there would have been a bunch of teams lining up to take him for a second rounder in the trade deadline. It's just you don't want that extra year on it, right? So it is what it is. It's definitely the best thing for everybody involved, and I think including him. Like if he can get some time to really rest his body, maybe get some extra, something under his legs, right? Maybe he gets another season or two out of it. You never know. It's something for both teams, and realistically, the Knicks need to play their young guys. Like if anything, I'm not advocating Alec Burks continue to play the point guard. They need to play their young guys. But we'll see if Tibbs does that. I don't think he will, but we'll see.
What's up, Tar Heel Nation? I just see you in here. You said you guys think LeBron will decline or casual decline LeBron coming back in 2023. Dan Goodwin doesn't want to be the king. We'll talk about that, I think, when we get to the Cavaliers topic,
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll
Trivial
talk about
Nation.
that.
And we'll get kind of more into that because I think that'd be an interesting conversation to kind of end the show with. But, to kind of continue talking about your point about Kemba, man, it does suck to see that Kemba Walker still hasn't found a good home where he can just kind of be himself and just I think this might be the reality of what Kemba Walker, because that's the reality of small guards, man. Like Isaiah
Yeah.
Thomas went through the same route, and Kemba Walker's going through the same route as well. Is that once you hit that peak and prime of your career, you start to decline a little bit because that your athleticism isn't what it once was. Kemba Walker's been doing this for a very long time. And it sucks to see that Kemba Walker, just can't stay healthy. Like I think that's his biggest thing.
Yeah.
That it's like it's turning into AD levels of just not being able to stay healthy. And if you can't stay healthy and be there on the court, you can't build any chemistry with your teammates. And then it just kind of leads to, what happens with guys like Kemba and that he now becomes a role player and becomes a guy that comes off the bench and does things like that. This was supposed to be like a nice spot for the New York Knicks. They're supposed to have momentum going into next season. Last year, talking about this year, with the Evan Fournier signing and the Kemba Walker signing, they were supposed to take a huge, I would say maybe not a huge step forward, but definitely like maintain where they're at. But it just hasn't seemed to be the case. And I know Julius Randle is, some of the catalyst to that because he hasn't been playing like his most improved player self. And so that also has a little bit to do with it.
Oh, certainly.
And, Pete, I wanted to ask you about like, what do you think is the biggest takeaway of your Knicks currently? Because I think to me it's like I just feel like they just haven't gotten any consistency from their guys. Like, guys have been getting hurt. Julius Randle has definitely, they finally have the scouting report on Julius Randle and how they're going to play him. And so, he hasn't been as effective as he once was.
It's a lot of things. Like a lot of what you said is completely accurate. Like the Knicks, I'll say this in their defense, right? I think they drastically outperformed how good of a team they were last season. Like
right.
as a whole unit, it really, and I don't know if I was maybe saying it as much as I kind of knew it deep down inside of me, but like that team really was not as good as what they played like last season. Like the entirety of the whole year, they had I think they had the opposing teams shooting open uncontested threes had the lowest make percentage against any team in the league all season long against the Knicks, right? And it really, really contributed heavily to how good their defense was. So that threw people off the scent, right? Like you could see it deep down that it was not. As I even told you, Bernie, going into the playoffs last season, if we have to rely on Julius Randle to win games, this is not the team. Like they're not good enough to do it. And realistically, what that comes down to is a lack of playmaking. Like there is no true playmaker on this team anywhere, period. Right? Like RJ has had a lot of flashes this season as being able to do that. Quickly showed flashes last season being able to do it, and he's regressed this season because a lack of like any consistency with any guards next to him. It's always somebody else. It's Fournier, it's Kemba, it's Grimes, it's Miles McBride, the 10 minutes he's gotten to play, right? It's all these different people in and out. And there's no way a young player can get better like that, right? Like that's not how it works, especially in that role. It's very rare that those players get better. So I would say it's mostly that, right? Like we outperformed our expectations last season, and the lack of playmaking really caught up to us. And Kemba was supposed to be kind of the Band-Aid. Like, let's use this guy to do that. But when the whole team takes a gigantic step backwards defensively, and then you introduce like a notoriously bad defender at this point in his career into the mix, like he has no protection from the public eye of how bad he really is, right? Like he did at different points have much better defensive teams around him, especially, with the Celtics down the stretch. Like, and that doesn't say much because, like, the thing that blows my mind the most about this, and people don't even mean it as a joke, right? Like, Tibbs loves veteran players. Like, he has a fetish for vets. Like, he really cannot help himself but play these guys. Kemba couldn't even get minutes. Like, how washed do you think he has to be in these practices to show that? Right?
Yeah.
Like, that would freak me out if I was any team looking at him. But to go back to the Knicks, it's definitely they were better. They were better last year than they really are.
Yeah.
Injuries this year have been a really big thing for us. And Derrick Rose, as much as he's not the MVP 21-year-old Derrick Rose, like very important leader on the
Right.
team. Like especially from we're not playing really well in this 5-minute stretch and we need just somebody to calm us down. We do not have anybody like that, and he was the guy for us last season. Like he won us so many games last year.
Yeah.
Um, it's really that. It's really that. It's pretty tough, man. Like the roster is just not good enough, and all the offseason signings we had, I tried to defend them to myself. They just weren't good. Like none of them have panned out. Fournier is the exact guy he was in Orlando. I am bummed. I tried to convince myself otherwise, but like that is the guy he's been forever. Like
Yep.
if anybody watched the Orlando Magic play with him and Vucevic, that's what he did. He misses tons of shots and takes tons of them every night. That's how he plays.
Yeah.
The intersection of this, sorry to interrupt you, my guy, but like the intersection of this is like where does this actually leave us going into next season? Because realistically, like next season is kind of the year that they've been building for 4 years now. Like the 2022 free agency class, and now with the potential of whatever's happening with Zion and Dame Lillard, right? All these guys. This is kind of the moment Knicks have been waiting for. They're still not good enough. They need a true number one. They have tons of pieces, like tons of pieces on paper, right? Even some interesting sign and trade players like Mitchell Robinson, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not in love with him, there's somebody that will really want a guy like that for sure, right? It's a good spot to be technically, but we also have like I think the 9th best odds in the lottery right now to get the number one pick. This is a super deep class again. Who knows, man? I mean, this team is really like if you look at who our good players are, it's our young guys, and they're actually like we have a crazy talented young core. I actually think I'm not even just saying this as biased as I am. Like I'll be as harsh as I need to be with the Knicks. They need everybody to be honest with them as possible, right? Especially their fans. But our young core is really underrated, I think. Like if you look at how good they are, like Quentin Grimes right now in the last 4 games before the break, before the All-Star break, was averaging 15 a game on 50% from three-point land, right? Like that's nice. And he's probably our best defender when he's on the court. So those two things in tandem, like that's the guy we just took at the end of the lottery, right? The same, or the end of the first round, excuse me. We did that with Quickly last year. We did that with Mitchell Robinson the year before, 2 years before. RJ is turning out nice, right? Like Obi is great when he actually gets minutes. This team has all the pieces to be interesting. They just don't ever show that they're interesting. And I hear people say it all the time right now that they're the worst team in the league to watch on League Pass. I totally agree. They're miserable. Like when it's Taj Gibson and Julius Randle taking these shots, like, dude, it's miserable to watch. I agree. But pieces are there. I'm very interested to see what they're going to do the second half of the season.
There you go. I was on mute for a second. Yeah, I do agree with you, Pete. I think that this team on paper should be like I think there's some pieces there that I like about your team. I would love to see you guys just kind of unleash Cam Reddish and RJ Barrett together and just kind of see what that tandem will be. Maybe that's not something you would be interested in, but
I agree. I didn't even mention Reddish. Like I love RJ. I should note that in all of this. I wouldn't trade RJ for anybody right now. I mean that sincerely. Like, I think we need a guy to be our number 2 that is like RJ. He is the perfect number 2, in my opinion. He's going to be happy with that if we're good. So let's keep him that way. Get a star to go in front of him and don't get rid of him. That's my biggest thing. And I like Reddish, too, when he plays.
Yeah, I think Reddish, seeing the improvements that he made in Atlanta, especially in the playoffs, making some big back buckets and just making an impact in some places. I think that you could potentially see something with him, like, especially with those two as the young core guys. And then try to find a veteran, kind of like middle age, well, like in their like mid 20s, a guy that can just help them, get over the hump.
Yeah.
I think that there's some good things there. You have Miles McBride, who, I think is still young and still improving. I think he could potentially be something in the league as kind of like a role guard.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I think he just needs a little bit more seasoning, and that just comes with playing more games. Quentin Grimes, again, your dude, the guy that you want to get a jersey of. I think that he could potentially
Yeah,
be something, man.
huge fan.
Um, and then I just think that eventually you do have to move on from a guy like Mitchell Robinson and see what you can trade for him. I feel like he could be a good asset and a trade piece, maybe depending on what happens, man. Like this draft class has a lot of great prospects. It depends on where the Knicks land. I think that they could get some pretty good, whether they can get some good guards. I think, to be honest with you, I don't think you need guards. I mean, besides, I think like a traditional point guard. Like if you can get a good point guard, I think this
Yeah,
team is all
that's what we
set.
need.
And obviously like you said, Kemba Walker was the band-aid because you only 2 years. Once you're done with the second year, you move on to the next point guard that could carry the Knicks franchise in the future. The one thing that I will say is that I do miss the Knicks being a very good team. I miss the Knicks when they were like competitive. There's nothing like a New York crowd. I mean, we saw it last year with Trae Young and the New York crowd. Like it's something that's missing in the NBA currently in terms of like that crowd that really gets into it. Kind of like a soccer crowd. Like they remind me of a soccer crowd. But the way that they get into it, the Warriors crowds are usually like this, especially in the 2014 to 17 range. Like those crowds, when they're into it and when they're feeling themselves a little bit, that's what I remember about New York Knicks basketball. Like even watching like the 90s highlights of Patrick Ewing playing against Michael Jordan, you can feel the crowd like that. Spike Lee obviously being the guy to lead the front. And so I think that
That's
you
the
can.
best, man.
I think you can get there, but I think there is some pieces that you need to start looking at and start trading away. I think, as much as I love Julius Randle, I think he's a guy that he can't be a one. He just can't
No,
be the
he's
number
gotta.
one option on a team. He might have to be the number three, because I think that his game is solid. But the problem is that since everyone's focusing their attention on him, it's hard for him to be so dynamic with because he's not a dynamic player, right? He's not a guy that's like a high flyer or like can athleticism just changes the game. He's like more of a ground guy, more ground and pound. And he's gonna try to bully ball some buckets, get some mid range shots, shoot some threes. And I think that we could potentially see something special if Julius Randle's the third option, and you guys can somehow get a nice guard. And then you can like let Alex Burks either come off the bench or start him, and then maybe start RJ Barrett off. I don't know. There's a lot of
Yeah,
options the Knicks can go, but I think it starts with just recognizing like are you a team that's going to continue this, continue the roster that you currently have, or are you going to try to make moves? And I think James Dolan needs to decide eventually like what that move is. But we all know James Dolan. He's probably not going to do that. But
who knows, man? I mean, he's pretty hands off these days, from what I understand. That's like I think that's the
that's a
word
blessing.
around town. He doesn't really do too much. Like he kind of trusts the guys that are there right now.
That is a blessing
So
to have him not in there.
yeah, no,
And
I
then
mean, most definitely it is.
And then I just want to check the standings really quick. I mean, right now they're in the 12th seed of the Eastern Conference. I mean, 25-34, definitely not where they want to be, but they could obviously still make a run and still really compete for the top 10 spot. But at the same time, is this Knicks team worthy of, or is not worthy, but are they thinking, should we go for that spot and go into the playoffs? Or are you thinking, let's try to just, be where we're at right now and just kind of hope and pray that we get a good lottery pick? I mean, what's your opinion, Peter, on that?
I mean, if it's up to me, like I tend to be on the more new age way of thinking, like, but even more importantly, like I really do just think our young players are better than these old guys right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would play them and either they're better than people think they are and we do outperform, our expectations with that style of team, or we tank and get a crazy good draft pick in a stacked year, you know? Like, who knows with the way the lottery is now, what a team like this ends up getting, right? I'm not gonna I'm not gonna be the guy that gets my hopes up for a Knicks draft pick ever. We get the 8 or 9 or 10 pick every single season, other than the one where we got RJ and Porzingis, right? Know how that panned out.
Yeah.
Like, I would not mind a high draft pick this year. Like, there's a couple guys that are special, like talent, I think.
All right.
Not only that, they fit our team super well. Like you can't tell me that Chet Holmgren wouldn't look nice in a Knicks uniform, right?
But do you think that he'll fall there? That's the question.
I mean, probably not. I'm more saying like, who knows how bad we could be for the rest of the season,
Yeah.
right? Like, if we play these young guys just to get them minutes, be bad, right? Who knows if we get the 5th lottery odds if we don't end up with 3 or 4, 2, whatever it is, right? Like, it happens most seasons. Some team get that spot, right? So it's never us. Why not just try and be low and see what happens, you know? Or even take that number 5 pick and trade that. It's something else to go get a guy, you know? Maybe that's what gets Zion, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? But I like the top of this draft as far as fits for the Knicks, excuse me.
If you had to pick 2 people from this draft, like who are the 2 guys? Real like let's say Chet Holmgren, Jabari Smith, Paulo out because they're probably going to be top 3. I mean, you could potentially be top 3, right? Depending on lottery odds and all that. But let's say like if you had to pick any other guy in this draft besides those 3, who else on this list do you like as someone that you could potentially like be really excited about for your Knicks? I have one guy in particular that I really like that you guys could probably potentially get. It just depends on, what happens and how everything shakes out.
You know, it's pretty tough. Like, there's a couple guys I do like Jaden Ivey. I do really like what I've seen from him.
Dude's
The
got
guy that
bounce.
the guy that does come to my mind, and this is an unconventional pick because I don't think he's even going to be allowed to be in this draft. And I'm totally not going to remember his name. But Scoot, do you know who I'm talking about? The kid that plays for Ignite?
Scoot. Are you talking about
You have to
Jalen
play in
Duren?
like the.
Oh, sorry, not Jalen
Nah,
Duren.
no, no, no.
Are you talking
Hold
about
on. Here, let me pull up the
Jaden
Ignite's
Hardy?
roster. No. There's a kid on Ignite's roster right now that reclassified. He should be a senior in high school. So they're saying that he's going to have to play another year in the
Scoot Henderson?
Scoot Henderson. So there's a lot of push in the league right now for Scoot Henderson to get moved up actually a year, like to allow him to move into the NBA a year early, right? He would be like the youngest NBA player in a long time if they do this. He is in the G League right now. He plays for Ignite with some other really talented players. Like who's on Ignite this year? I always forget who's on there other than this kid because
Jaden Hardy, another guy.
yeah. Jaden Hardy does look nice too. I like Jaden Hardy. But that being said, I like Scoot Henderson a lot. Like what I have seen, and albeit not very much, I heard about this kid a few months back, and I was very interested just based on like he has a lot of connections in the NBA already for how young he is. And there's a lot of people lobbying for this kid to get moved into this draft, like powerful people in the NBA trying to get the rules changed for this kid.
The oligarchies. The
Yeah,
oligarchies of the NBA.
yeah. I mean, even like I think KD was a person who has even talked about it publicly. But that being said, he's the type of guard like I don't know. I see a lot of Ja Morant like style of he could be that kind of culture building guard, and he's special athletically. He's not afraid to. Like he is better than I think everybody else on Ignite, and they have some guys who are going to go in the top 10. So. I don't know. I would want him if I could pick anybody unconventionally. If I had number 1, I would take Banchero, though.
You like Paulo?
I really do. I think he's going to be an absolute menace in the league. Like, right away. Like, just it's the same way I felt about Mobley last season. Like, physically, he's a man. Like, there's not a lot of guys in the league as big as he is. And depending on situation he gets put into, like I can see him most definitely. He could be like almost a 20-point per game scorer in his first season, I think.
Yeah, I mean the dude is 6'10" and 250, so
He's a freak. He's a freak.
He's got that.
And the
that
one
Giannis
thing about
build.
him too is like he's not built big in the way that like Zion is built big, right?
Yeah.
Like Paolo, and this isn't even just speaking like with recency bias, right? About Zion, like Zion, people have been scared about Zion's health since he was in high school. Because the way he's built is like it's so dynamic that there's not a lot of sturdiness, you don't feel like, for the long run, right? Like I don't get that vibe from Paolo at all. Like he is built sturdy. Like that guy looks like he's going to be good for a while. I would take him number 1 personally.
Yeah.
And that would be the only reason I would take him over Chet is just because of the build. Genuinely.
We might have to do, maybe when we're a little bit more prepared. Maybe next week we should do something, Pete. Maybe next Saturday and just kind of do a little mock draft, or just just look at some guys and just kind of like, see what guys are there, what guys aren't, in terms of what teams should be looking at. But I think another guy you could look at, Pete, is AJ Griffin from Duke. This dude's been on absolute tear right now. He's a young freshman. I think that's another guy that could potentially the Knicks could look at. I know that this mock draft I'm looking at right now has you guys taking Ty Washington, the point guard from Kentucky. But
who knows?
I am really big into the big guards right now, like your Tyrese Halliburtons, your LaMelo Balls, and I know those are rare to have in the draft, and you would love to have those type of guys, but I think another guy that you can look at maybe is Johnny Davis, from Wisconsin. I've
like
loved his game so far. I know he's a sophomore and about to be 20 years old, but I still think he kind of fits that timeline that your team is on right now, and so I think there's a lot of things that currently the NBA or like the Knicks could look at and go in different directions. Benedict Mathurin from Arizona, another kind of like 6'7" shooting guard. Could potentially take over Evan Fournier and be a better shooter than him, or maybe not a better shooter, I should say, but could be a little bit more dynamic than what you getting from Evan Fournier. Hang on one second. Let's see. Stream just. Do you lose me?
Lost you too. I think your internet just cut out.
Oh man, come on, internet. I'm plugged in. Are we good now?
I can hear you totally.
Okay.
I don't know if the stream is back up though.
Yep. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
I think I can see it on. Yep, we're good. So yeah, like I said, Pete, I think that there's a lot of different directions that the Knicks can go in. I think that if you're looking for a point guard or even just any type of guard, I think that there's a lot of guards in this draft. Like you said, this is a very good class. This isn't one of these classes that's like it's only LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards, or what was it last year? Who was last year?
You're talking about this last one? It was Jalen Green and what's his name? Cade.
Oh yeah, Cade Cunningham. Like it's not one of these drafts where it's like those two guys. Maybe Mobley as well. Like there's 4 guys and then that's it. I think there's a lot of good solid role players. I think last year was a good draft. I think we kind of claimed that in last year's videos that we made. But I think this class is also another good. I think these next couple of classes are pretty good. Except I would say the 2023 one. I think it's a really like just top heavy class with Wembanyama and Amani Bates and all those guys.
Very much agree on that one. Like I haven't done a lot of research for 2023 just yet, but from what I've seen, yes. Unless Scoot Henderson is going to end up in that one, I would say he would be up there too for me.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, I'd put him in like my top like 6 prospects right now. Yeah. Like of anybody who could be available in the next year or two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That being said, like we're on an absolute tear of good talent coming into the league, right?
Exactly.
Like I thought last year was stacked to the gills. I still do. Like, I mean, you even look down to like in the late 10s, right? Like some of those dudes easily are rookie of the years most years. Josh Giddey, Franz Wagner. I mean, geez, like you could even look at some other guys too, right? Like there's a ton of them this season.
Right, exactly.
Duarte, whoever, right? That being said, this next draft looks very similar. Like a lot of these guys, like they have the mock I'm looking at right now has Jaden Hardy at number 11. That dude is very good to be the number 11th pick. Like, he
Yeah.
looks really solid. So I'm interested. That's kind of, going back to where we even got to this topic from, like the Knicks. This is one of those seasons where the top teams are so good right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I don't know. Like, it's not like going into the bubble where you thought, who knows, like going into the bubble, what is going to happen? You know? It's not that type of season. So I would say, geez, man, what are we going to force these wins with these vets for, dude? Get these guys some minutes. Let's lose a bunch of games. Get that. Maybe this is the last pick we need.
Yeah.
No, maybe this is the last one.
Yeah. I still think that
I'd take it.
I still think there's some things that you can build around and just kind of. I think this is going to be a not a long process, but this is going to be almost similar to a trust the process. I think in terms of like really dialing in for the Knicks on like what team you want to build around or what team do you want, right? And I think that's where this offseason the Knicks front office has to really take a deep look at themselves and look at this roster and say, all right, who are we keeping and who are not keeping? Because I think if you guys can do that and like identify which guys are staying, which guys are going, and just kind of start building around that, I think that you can have a pretty solid and promising future, in the next couple of years and maybe take over, depending on what happens in this World War III. But, just kind of the things that are going on right now. But I think the Knicks could be, set up for a very promising future. If they build the right way. And I think that they can. I think, like you said, as long as James Dolan is hands off and he's just a super fan, then I think you should be okay.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, this is not our season. It wasn't our season last year. And for anybody that convinced themselves it was, like, I'm sorry. It was not that. But you hear it all the time. People love to play in the Garden. It is not going to take forever to get one of those guys to come play in New York. It's just not. And realistically, I would say, even as bad as we've been this season and the drop off from last year, I still feel like the perception about the Knicks has changed a little bit. Don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah,
It is.
I feel like the Knicks are finally like a team where it's not like a laughing stock, right? They're not like
Yeah.
a team that people make fun of anymore. It's not a team where memes are
I mean, they
being
do, but
created or
not as
born.
much.
There's still
It's
memes a
not
little
like
bit,
we're
but
throwing out like what's his name? Our bat. Oh, gosh, I'm a bum, dude. He was a coach, the guy we brought up from our G League to be our head coach during the season we fired Fizdale, right? Like, we had a backup coach beating our team for more than half the season. Like, we were winning no games,
right.
and we had Frank Ntilikina was our biggest hope. Like, this team is very different than that one. So, and from all accounts, like, whether or not it ends up happening, you know me, I will not get my hopes up for any of this stuff because I do not want to be disappointed. Like, why would I? I would be disappointed all the time with the Knicks, right? But all the reports about Zion since he's come into the league that he's wanted to play in New York. Like, that has never changed. Whether that's real or not, that rumor's been around forever. Usually when a rumor, like, we've seen this forever. Whenever there's a rumor that just never goes away, it usually is right in some aspect. Whether or not it's completely the truth, we'll never know. He has probably said it a couple times behind closed doors. That's why we hear about it so often. So, I mean, that is something, man. That's the type of guy, like, if he can be healthy, that's the type of guy that changes the outlook of an entire franchise, you know? I would say if you just dropped him in with whatever best roster lineup we could throw out, and you would have to exclude Julius Randle, right? Like,
Yeah.
no matter how, so don't even count him in that lineup. But whatever it is, that team is pretty solid. If it's the Zion from the last 25 games of last season, right?
Yeah.
Like, that guy was a freak. Like 27.5 points and like 9 rebounds or something like. He's a freak. Like, that's something to look forward to for the Knicks for the first time in a while. And it seems like it's somebody that might actually want to play in New York so bad that he's willing to force his way to get there, like Carmelo did. So most of the time, people are fighting to get their way out. So we're looking for people like that always.
Exactly. And let's kind of move on to another point, Pete. And this is this is gonna be a combined video. So for people who are watching the live stream and kind of tune into the next one, it's gonna be two parts that we're gonna talk about. We're obviously talking about Kemba Walker out, and then we're gonna talk about this story. Tom Thibodeau not worried about the rumors on a job security in relations with Leon Rose. William Wesley remains good. So this is what the story goes on to say. The New York Knicks followed up their breakout 2021 season in which they were the fourth seed in the Eastern Conference with the disappointing 21-22. The future of Tom Thibodeau as a head coach is uncertain per recent reports, but he remains confident of his standing. Ian Bagley reported last week that William Wesley has been critical of Thibodeau in discussions with James Dolan. I talk to Wes all the time, Thibodeau said on Wednesday. I don't respond to rumors or any of that kind of stuff. I know the drill here. I've been here before, so I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Thibodeau has had a long history of working with Leon Rose and Wesley that predicates the Knicks. I talk to Leon every day, talk to West every day, said Thibodeau, who is in the second year of a 5-year contract, so that doesn't change. So, Pete, I want to start with it and start talking to you about it. Is Tom Thibodeau the coach to lead this group that we talked about for the last 30 minutes? Is this the guy to lead your group to the promised land and potentially get to the playoffs? And, you know, the ultimate goal is to win a championship. Is this the championship winning coach that you can have on your roster?
I really think he could be. Like, genuinely. I mean that. Like, right now, he's definitely not doing a good job. You know? Just 100%. Just doing bad, right? We cannot be playing Taj Gibson minutes right now. That doesn't even make any sense to anyone around the league. I know we like him. Love Taj as like a personality, right? He seems like a nice guy. He's always in the city doing things for people. Like, good for him, right? Doesn't mean he should have minutes on the team right now, right? Especially over Obi, who's been very good when he plays. That being said, like, I do think Tibbs, in the right situation, has shown, like, time and time again that he can get the best out of players. You know, like, he really can under the right circumstances when the players respond well to it.
Right.
I would say that, like, this season has been very unfair to Tibbs in a couple ways, right? One is what I mentioned earlier. The team was like outperforming itself like crazy last season, right? Which, if anything, should be a credit to him because this is mostly the same team, right? So, like, credit to Tibbs for getting them to the fourth seed. They had one of the best defensive ratings in the league. It might even have been number 1, if I remember correctly. Like, they were great, you know? That being said, they did outperform, and he was the coach both seasons, so it's going to look bad on him, but he also should get credit for last season. It's the same team, you know?
Yeah.
But Julius Randle's drop-off has been so drastic. Like, there's not much that you can expect Tibbs to do. And also, he didn't make those off-season signings that haven't worked out. No, that was Leon Rose and Worldwide West. Like, they're signing Kemba. They're signing Fournier. They're doing that. It's not like Taj Gibson's minutes are making those guys bad. It's not his fault. So, like, I like Tibbs. I would keep Tibbs at least one more year. And I would even go back to what we just talked about with Zion, right? Maybe this is the exact type of guy that can get a player like that regimented in, you know, maybe that more physical style of play keeps him in shape longer, right? You never know. Because there are guys like RJ who have responded super well to Tibbs coaching. And RJ's only gotten better as the years have gone on. There's been no decline in any way, shape, or form. And that obviously isn't saying much because he wasn't very good his first season and a half. But he really has consistently gotten better under Tibbs coaching. So that and the fact that all our young guys do look good in the minutes they get, it has to say something for Tibbs as a coach. And he is a winner. Like, generally speaking, if his team is not just a bunch of young guys and underperforming overpaid players, like, he does win most seasons, right? So I would keep him, and I would try and run it back with a team that doesn't have Julius Randle and a bunch of bad contracts. And then we'll know. This season is really, like, I don't think we know much about Tibbs. I don't think we know much. Sorry to interrupt you one more time, but, like, I don't think we know much about any of this stuff with Worldwide West or Leon Rose. They couldn't have expected much different this season other than to repeat like last season, but a little worse, right? Like, we weren't coming into this season thinking we were championship contenders.
Right.
So it's just kind of another season and back to the drawing board with more pieces next offseason.
Yeah. See, the thing that I'll disagree just a little bit on that and push back. For me, what I find troubling about a guy like Thibodeau, for me personally, Pete, is that I think he grinds players a lot too much, and kind of wears them down, and to a point where guys are getting injured or guys are not being able to play the full game or not really play the full game, but they definitely have a lot more nicks and bruises than I would say the rest of the league does, and that's just a credit to like the style that he plays. Right, he plays grinded out defense, plays grinded out type of ball, and that's the reason why, like you said, like they were the number 4 seed last year is because everybody was bought in and he maximized what he had on his team. But I also think as much as we credit him, we also have to blame him in that sense as well, because I think some of these injuries may have not happened to Kemba Walker. I mean, I know Kemba Walker's injury prone, so I'm not going to take that away from put it past Kemba Walker getting hurt because of that, but that could be a potential leading factor into that. And I just think that you need a young coach to help guide this young team. Because I think as you get younger, especially if we're talking about draft picks that you're picking up, and building around some of these young guys, Reddish, RJ, and then, potentially whatever pick you get for this top 10 or top 15. I think a young coach would actually really help this group and really get them going. As much as I would love to, because I love Thibodeau. Thibodeau helped us win a championship back in 2008 for the Boston Celtics, and I really appreciate him doing that for us. But again, at the same time, Pete, like I do think that a good dose of a young coach, and maybe Thibodeau, I feel like Thibodeau should be a defensive coordinator, a defensive coach for a team, because I think that that's kind of where his style and his type of regimen is where I think it fits best as an assistant. Like I think he has some good X's and O's in terms of like drawing up plays, because obviously you guys did really well last year.
He definitely does, but you're not wrong at all.
But
like you're totally right. Like realistically, if he didn't have the ego that Tom Thibodeau has, right, which kind of is what makes him, he would be perfect as a defensive coach for tons of teams. Like X's and O's defensively, he is about as good as it gets in the NBA right now. Like when he has good defensive players on his team, they're one of the best defenses in the league every single season. So. Yeah, no, and you're totally right about the injuries too. Like RJ's injury that he's been out with, that was because of Tibbs overplaying him, putting him back in the last 3 minutes of a game that we were already down by like 20 points. Like that is his fault. We also don't know the conversations that him and RJ are having. Maybe RJ's asking for that. If he's asking for that because he wants to go out there and get better, guess what? I kind of don't disagree. Like maybe we need more of that. People saying, "Hey, I do want all the minutes I can get.
Yeah.
I do want to get better," right? Because there's so many guys in the league that play the exact opposite of that nowadays. They're looking to have nights off all the time. So
part-time hooper.
That's a culture thing, right? Like you look at the Heat. Like Spoelstra does not get the backlash about this type of stuff that other guys do. And mind you, his rotations are better, right? Spoelstra is a better coach in every way, shape, and form. So don't take what I'm saying as any comparison directly. They do run intensely regimented, like physical training program, and they work those guys really hard, but you don't hear anything about that. But I think that's just because he wins all the time, right?
Yeah.
It's tough though, man. Like I like the culture part of it. I agree with you. Like if there's a young coach out there at is that type of guy, like that type of culture building coach, sure, maybe I would consider it, right? But I just didn't see that last offseason necessarily. And I don't see it going into this offseason, like the coaching candidate wheel that's out there always. Like, I don't know. None of it does as much for me, really. Like none of them, I should say, do all that much for me. And I'm sure there's somebody that could prove me wrong. I don't know every assistant coach for every team. Of course I don't. But it's not like any of the guys' names that are always floated out there like David Fizdale is the replacement for Vogel if Vogel gets fired, right? Like,
Yeah.
what does that say about the coaching carousel, right? Like Fizdale was terrible with the Knicks.
Yeah.
It's been years, so maybe he's better, but I don't want Fizdale. I'd rather have Tibbs than somebody like that.
Yeah, I mean, like I think Phil Handy can coach, man. I think that he should be getting an opportunity. And
Hey,
whether
I
that,
mean, who knows? Like if LeBron, I mean, that gets floated out all the time. Hire Phil Handy as the coach, and then you bring LeBron, and then draft Bronny. I mean, whatever. I don't think that's
yeah,
gonna happen. That's fantasy land, but
yeah,
I like Phil Handy too. You never know.
yeah. I think the question for me is like, does Phil Handy want to be a head coach? Like, maybe he's one of these assistants that enjoys kind of being the assistant and not being like the guy to like be the not necessarily like he's afraid of being the leader, but he enjoys the role of like helping out the coaches to help out the players type of thing. Like being that like good cop bad cop where the coach is, stereotypically the bad cop at times, and then you have the assistants just kind of be like, man, you're doing great, like, I'm seeing what you're doing out there, like keep doing your thing. Like I think that's probably what Phil Handy enjoys the best about being that assistant coach, and so that's probably where he's more in tuned at this point. Probably on the Lakers more so. So, I think that this is going to be a very interesting offseason for the Knicks. This is going to be one of those things where the GM and everybody in the front office has to think like, is this an arbitration year, or is this a year that, is just a outlier compared to, Tom Thibodeau was last year, or is this what Tom Thibodeau is? You get as much as you can max out for Tom Thibodeau, and then you have to move on. Like that's going to be the biggest question mark I think the front office has to think about, besides the roster moves, is the coaching spot. Like, do they go and get a young coach that's on the bench of, I'm trying to think of like, the Warriors. Like, does Mike Brown maybe get another shot at being a head coach? I know he's been an assistant for Steve Kerr for a very long time. Might be time to get him back into the coaching realm, dip his feet in again. Oh, dang
For
it.
the Knicks.
Oh, no. I think I'm disconnected for a second. Yep, there we go. All right. There we go. I think I'm back. Oh, man.
Back.
I'm connected to the internet. This is kind of frustrating, but nevertheless, sorry for people watching this video. There's probably going to be this part where like you don't notice that the stream disconnects. So, but just kind of like continue on to the point. I think that there is coaches out there on some of these benches, whether it's the Denver bench, whether it's the Golden State bench. I even think like maybe on this Memphis bench, or even maybe the Phoenix has a young coach that's like looking to be the next, maybe head coach for a basketball organization. I think that there's people out there. It's just about whether or not the Knicks feel that, like you said, Tom Thibodeau can, like, if they like that style, if they like the culture that Thibodeau brings, then they're probably going to keep him. But if they like, especially for these young guys, to have a coach where they, have someone that I would say helps them continue moving in the direction that they want to, then there might be something to look at. So we'll see, man. I think this is going to be a fun offseason for the Knicks. I don't want to like poo-poo on their season right now and say that it's over for them, but I think that
it's pretty bad.
It's for the second half they're gonna have to, they dig themselves into a deep hole, just like, let's say for example, you're down by 20 in the second quarter. It's a big hole to climb back for these next two quarters, and so we'll see if the Knicks are able to climb back, or are they going to be a team that kind of retreats a little bit and starts building for the future and starts thinking about how can we build this team to have multiple successful years in the playoffs and just kind of continue to grow and develop. Do you have any last say, Pete, before we move on to our next topic?
Oh, no. Let's keep it moving.
Alrighty. So like I said, guys, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button if you're new to the channel. And let us know what you think about the New York Knicks. If you're a Knicks fan, let us know in the comment section down below. Put a 2 in the chat if you are a Knicks fan. Or 2 in the comment section if you're watching this video afterwards. And let us know, what do you think the Knicks' biggest needs are this offseason? And also, do you think that there should be a coaching change coming soon? Let us know in the comment section down below.